So in this lab, you will be using a simulation. It's a major difference from the previous labs that we've been working on where you actually have to like set up lab like glassware and like an actual lab workbench, right? In this simulation, everything's kind of already set up and you have to just know how to control it and know how to read um, the different measurements that you have available. So this is a picture of how the simulation looks whenever you get to that screen. So you have like essentially like a container and you have a bunch of other things over here which I'll go over right now when the video shows up, but the major objectives of this lab are for you to design experiments where you look at the relationships between pressure, volume, and temperature. You will also create some very simple graphs based on these predictions and observations. And then finally, you'll make some qualitative statements. So qualitative just means like things that essentially don't have to do with numbers. It's more like, okay, you know the relationship, like it's directly proportional. So then because this is increasing, then XYZ must increase, right? So you'll make those types of statements in some little situation, scenario type questions. So this is the overall procedure for the initial part of the simulation. I don't necessarily like to call this a procedure because you are the one making a procedure since you are designing experiments. So first, but I still want it like this so that I can just show you how it's pieced out. So first you're going to make predictions. You're going to fill out the graph that I have that has little empty mini graphs with empty axes, so you can label what the axes are, and then you will make a line on the graph in order to show the relationship that you're predicting. You will also explain why you predict this relationship. Secondly, you will actually get to the designing experiments. So you will design an experiment for each case. So you will have to hold certain parameters constant, and then you can examine the other two parameters from that. You will write a short description on how to use the simulation. This shows to me, and I've stressed this also previously on previous labs and also in just the lab reports that you've been writing so far, how the procedure part that you write out, or like the description of how you did the experiment, that is what indicates to me whether you mastered and whether you understand what you were doing, and just period, like if you actually did it yourself. Because if it doesn't have detail, then how do I know that you actually went through the steps? So you can be as detailed as you want. It's okay if it's like a paragraph. That's completely fine. But from here, I'll show you how the simulation actually looks and all the different things that you can adjust. Okay, so here I opened up just lab 7 and then I clicked the link for the simulation. Obviously I want you to do the making predictions first and then open this up, but I opened it up, clicked ideal. Okay, so here's where you see this little like container chamber. There's some things off to the side, some different sections, things that you can choose. This is where you can hold things constant. Here is your pressure gauge. Here is your thermometer. Over here is where you can apply heat or take away heat. And then right there, right there is the different particles that you can have, smaller or bigger, basically heavy or light, the way it says right here. Now, in order to introduce gas particles into this little container, you pull the pump up and you pull it back down. And then from there, you can start holding things constant. After you hold things constant, whichever one you want to choose first, then you can start adjusting heat. You can start adjusting the volume. So for example, I was adjusting volume, I was adjusting temperature, I kept volume constant, and I kept moles constant because I didn't introduce any more gas. And then I was looking at how the pressure was being affected by increasing temperature. And you can see how the pressure was being affected. Next, I introduced more moles, and I'm just essentially just showing you like the different things you can do. But always remember, you will have to hold two things constant while you look at two other things. This is how you increase volume. You just pull this little like handle to the side, and it will increase the volume of the container. There's some other things you can adjust. You can pull up a stopwatch just to see like over time how much things change. Here it actually gives you the width of the container. There's just a lot you can like play around with, but just keep it simple. Remember, hold two things constant, and then you can look at the other two in that relationship that you're examining. And then finally, for data collection, you will be just verifying your original prediction. So this is another table that you're going to fill out. It's very simple. You will indicate what parameters you held constant, and then you will explain like what law this relationship followed. For the applied exercise, you will be using all the knowledge you hopefully either already know, or it's okay if this simulation is very like easy to you, if you already are feel okay with the gas laws. I think it's pretty simple, and it's like a good visual of how the gas laws work. But I want you to actually apply the knowledge that hopefully you refresh during this lab by answering some applied questions about just little scenarios. So you just answer them like in 2 to 3 sentences in your own words, obviously, and explain like your reasoning, like, oh, this will happen because of XYZ law. In that law, you know, this is directly proportional to this. Just simple, using the knowledge that you just collected. And then finally, I also want to remind you guys that there's no lab report due for this, since it's not actually a lab, it's a simulation. There's no formal lab report due. It'll just be this handout that you turn in, and it's worth the 100 points. So pay attention to how many points everything is worth. But no lab report for this one, only for lab 5 that you did.